We're watching James Somerton's Revolutionary Girl Utena video. What am I in for here? It's unreleased footage. Who released this? How did this happen? You're right. It cannot possibly be worse than a Lily Orchard video. All right, James. Let me remind everybody, my take on James Somerton is I want to ghostwrite a new career for James, team up with James. I want to re-release James as like the Disney villain of the queer community. I don't think James has done anything nearly as cancelable as I have. I think the two of us can change the conversation to benefit us. Team up with me, James. No matter how much I shit on this video, that doesn't change my opinion that we can work together. Your hair looks ridiculous. Your outfit also looks ridiculous.
The magical girl trope of anime hit a fever pitch in the 1990s with the international phenomenon of Sailor Moon.
True.
Which typified the style. Both in homage and parody, these tropes have been recreated by artists ever since. And have also...
I'm not, by the way, going to bother figuring out what is or is not plagiarized here. Like, I will assume that probably stuff that is true in here was plagiarized. I'll just call out whatever's not true.
Also become an entire genre in their own right. Whether it's newer magical girls like Puella Magi Madoka Magica, the westernized magical girls like the cast of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, or the gender-bent magical boys of Cute High Earth Defense Club. The trope has been a staple of anime.
There's no chance in fucking hell he has ever heard of Cute Earth High Defense Club, except for whatever he stole this writing from. I promise that.
For decades. But none, to my knowledge, have been more discussed and dissected than the 1997 series Revolutionary Girl Utena. Created by...
I don't think this is as true as the reputation is now that Utena is like super discussed and talked about. Like, that's fucking super recent. Like, the reason so much of it is happening is because it wasn't before. Utena wasn't that talked about for like 20 years. It's kind of like a rediscovered masterpiece. This is a problem that also Lily Orchard made. Like, everybody keeps saying this. Like, Utena was this weird classic going back to the 90s. Utena was not popular. It was a cult favorite that is just finally finding its legs, like finally really being like broadly appreciated as of the 2010s.
By Bipapas, a production group formed by director Ikuhara Kunihiko, Saito Chiho, Hasegawa Shinya, Enokido Yoji, and...
It annoys me that he said director but then didn't specify what anybody else's role was.
Guro Yurichiro. So let's dive into the mesmerizing world of Ikuhara.
I fucking hate that tie. Why does the tie look like it was not tied like a tie? Why is it just like a weird scrunched up bundle? Why is your collar up? This is why you can be a Disney villain. He looks like Gary Oldman in The Fifth Element in this video.
His creative journey. You see, back in the 90s, Ikuhara graced Toei Animation with his presence during the production of the beloved Sailor Moon series. He co-directed the second season, Sailor Moon R, alongside Sato Yunichi, and took the helm as the sole director for both the animated film Sailor Moon R the movie and the third season, Sailor Moon S. But Ikuhara grew restless in the confines of adapting existing works, longing for some creative control. Thus, after the conclusion of Sailor Moon S in 1995, he set forth on a quest to birth an original series. In this endeavor, he assembled the illustrious Bipapas, a consortium of creative talents from anime and...
See, this is more like, this isn't necessarily untrue, but we don't really know that it was Ikuhara specifically. Everybody in Bipapas, I'm pretty sure, was working on Sailor Moon or like had some kind of involvement. It wasn't like he just personally did this, you know? That's why it was a 5-person group.
Manga. You see, Bipapas had quite the history together. Hasegawa and Enokido had previously joined forces with Ikuhara on Sailor Moon.
So yeah, they were...
Enokido penned many
Why make it sound like one guy's idea if they were all working together already?
Bipapas had also lent their talents to the esoteric Neon Genesis Evangelion. As for Saito, she was a seasoned manga artist.
No, Bipapas didn't lend their talent to Ava. They weren't formed yet. They couldn't have. Some of them might have worked on Ava. That doesn't translate to that.
Who had not yet ventured into the realm of anime. Now, initially, Ikuhara envisioned Utena as a mainstream shoujo series, hoping to ride the coattails of Sailor Moon's commercial success. In fact, they began with the concept titled Revolutionary Girl Utena Kiss, featuring a group of valiant female warriors known as the Neo Elegansar.
If this is true, I've never heard it. I don't know if this is like deep tier information that I just never came across. I don't know this part.
Extravaganza!
Battling the enigmatic end
it
of the
certainly
world.
doesn't matter.
But
it
as
doesn't
the
add
creativity
anything
flowed,
to
they
know
settled
that.
on a different path.
Yeah,
a romantic
citation
action
needed.
show
Thank you,
starring a pretty
Alan.
girl who wears boys' clothes. The school setting was a cornerstone of anime. But other elements like the duels and the mysterious rose
Also, you can call it boys' clothes, but like none of the boys are wearing fucking biker shorts with their whole legs exposed. There's a little bit more to it than that.
ride were yet to enter the plot. As Bipapas commenced their 6-month planning phase after Saito's arrival, they delved into the nitty-gritty of the story, world building, and the intricate process of translating Saito's visual style
It's
into
more
anime.
just to say
In
she's
parallel,
not
Saito
wearing the
embarked on
girl's
creating a manga
uniform.
adaptation of Utena, while still contributing her expertise to the
But like, look at what the guy's wearing. Like, he doesn't have frills, you know? He doesn't have like a skirt implication.
anime's development. Now, a fascinating tidbit here is that while Utena inevitably carries
You're right, Light Space Mind. His bad habit is making his writing sound more dramatic by being wrong on the details. That is exactly the issue. That's why I think he, again, makes a great Disney villain. Not a good journalist. He should be doing something more dramatic, more like James should be doing dramatic readings of stories. You know, like he's got a great voice. He's great at speaking. He's great at reading a script. He's got a lot of charisma despite how he dresses. I think he would be a lot better at doing like dramatic readings and like stuff that doesn't just stuff that's not fucking journalism or history revisionism. I tweeted out yesterday some categories of people that have the same responsibilities, and they need to really consider this fact: journalists, critics, historians, and psychologists. You all kind of have the same job, just to get the fucking facts right. Do your due diligence. Make sure your phrasing is correct. You cannot do any of those 4 jobs without those skills. I consider what I do somewhere in between all of that. I don't consider myself an accurate historian. I don't always do my due diligence, but I mostly talk about personal anecdotes. I don't try to talk too much about stuff I don't literally know. And even if I do talk about history, I tend to tell you where I got it from. You know, I will cite my source so that you can then interrogate them and find out if they're correct. I don't purport my videos to be like these collegiate essays. I think James went just too far in the direction of trying to look like he is like belongs on Nebula or like is one of these like edutainment YouTubers, and he's not. He's like me. He's a narcissist. You know, he's like a person who this is all born of self-love. The problem is he's just not that talented at he's not talented at writing. He's talented at performing. He's talented at doing the script on camera. That's why I think he'd be better for like dramatic reading and that kind of stuff. I think I could relaunch this guy's career. I just have to get him the fuck out of journalism.
echoes of Princess Knight and The Rose of Versailles, 2 shoujo manga series known for their cross-dressing sword-fighting heroines, Ikuhara was persistently apprehensive about being seen merely as a parody of these iconic works. Saito, on the other hand, was brought in to Bipapas primarily because the team wanted a female perspective to avoid unintentionally parodying shoujo manga. Shoujo manga is manga that's aimed at young girls, by the way. Fast forward to 1996, with Saito's manga adaptation of Utena underway, negotiations for the broadcast of the Utena anime were finally sealed, and production began in earnest. Bipapas took the reins of production, with the esteemed JC...
Landon said, I want James to moan in my ear. He probably wants that too, Landon. Another thing I like about James is that he has power bottom energy, because I first became a fan of James when I first was like really going into the gay part of YouTube. Like I need to start following more gay creators. I need to hear the voices of people who take as much dick as I do. No, I don't want to fuck James Somerton. I'm saying I view him as a fellow power bottom. There's not a lot of us.
Incorporation of avant-garde elements such as theatrical inspired layouts, shadow plays that offer commentary on each episode's events.
If anybody lives in Brazil and is trying to give dick to my administrator, she's hurting for it.
The experimental choral compositions of J.A. Cesar.
That's the best I could do for you, Ellen. I'm sorry it's embarrassing, but
the series veered away.
Signal boosting is the best way,
creating what Ogoro described as a tug of war.
It's worked for me.
Saito and Ikuhara. Saito ardently championed the initial romantic concept for Utena over Ikuhara's increasingly esoteric vision. They even reached a point where they didn't speak to each other for 3 months straight. Saito's concern, you see, was not ideological, but pragmatic. She believed the mainstream shoujo audience might not embrace anything other than a traditional male-female romance. Ikuhara, however, kept the full extent of his intended same-sex romance between Utena and Anthe under wraps. Ultimately, Saito supported the way the series handled the relationship between...
I think everyone here can use that. Well, where do you live? Everyone who needs dick, tell me where you live and I'll signal boost you.
Between the characters. Nothing succeeds like success. Since then, Revolutionary Girl Utena has garnered a chorus of praise both at home in Japan and across the international stage. For all that Sailor Moon takes the lion's share of public discussion, Utena's influence can be felt in the development of anime to this very day. In 1997, the series won the coveted Animation Kobe Award for the Best Television category. And as the years rolled on, in 2017, NHK, the network behind Utena,
Wait,
Utena
hold
has graced
on. Wait,
multiple
wait,
best
wait.
of lists with
What are
its
you talking
presence.
about?
And NHK, the network behind Utena, conducted a national poll to determine
The network behind Utena. Were they part of the committee? Was it just the first network that played it? Like, certainly it must have been played on more than one network. What does he mean by the network behind Utena? And that kind of stuff is confusing when you spent the whole video like being like, okay, these people were behind Utena. Also, this network is behind Utena. Whoa, 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 whoa. Who is that? What is the NHK? What are you talking about? Like, I know that the NHK is the Japanese PBS, but it's like, or the more like the Japanese BBC, like a mandatory, like government funded channel that everybody has. Does James know that? Because there's a number of anime funded by them, but it's kind of rare.
100 greatest anime in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the medium, in which Utena placed 19th. Utena has graced multiple.
This is the kind of thing where it also feels like you're trying to sell me on how much of a classic this thing is. But if that was true, we'd all just know about it. Like, he's talking about it like everybody knows Utena, you know, because it won all these contests. And it's like, well, okay, if everybody knows it, why do you feel the need to sell me on how important it is?
Multiple best of lists with its presence. Anime Insider hailed it as one of the top 10 best
Anime
anime
Insider.
ever. Writer Mike Toole, in his review, declared
Oh
the
my God,
series
Mike
to be
Toole.
the most important anime of the 90s. However,
that's just fucking factually wrong. Neon Genesis Evangelion is the most important anime of the 90s, without which I cannot imagine Revolutionary Girl Utena would have been created. So Mike Toole, you're out of your fucking gourd. Maybe it will eventually prove to be more important than Ava. I just think to say that now is a little bit daft. Even with trans people, Ava is more important than Utena still. I don't think it's even caught up.
Hype about it. What is Revolutionary Girl Utena actually about? Get comfortable.
By the way, this is total fuck music. This is like pornographic music playing in the back of this. I just noticed.
Because that's not an easy question to answer. And things get weird. Revolutionary Girl Utena is divided into 3 sagas: the Student Council Saga, the Black Rose Saga, and the climactic Akio Otori Saga, or the Apocalypse Arc, depending upon the release. Utena Tenju is a middle school student, and it's very, very important to remember that she's a middle school student throughout the series and the movie. To say that she struggles to keep up good grades is unfair to her, because she doesn't really seem to care about that stuff, or anything that isn't sports or her friends.
Yeah, now we're in like dramatic piano ballad music.
She is, as we would describe, a tomboy, and a subject of...
Amy, I'm with you. Utena's a better show, but definitely not more influential. Yeah, I would say that too. Anyway, let's watch this fucking James Somerton video.
Simultaneous jealousy, fascination, and desire from almost everyone in the school. As a child, Utena lost both of her parents in an undescribed accident. She managed to pull herself together due to a quote-unquote chance encounter with an individual she described as a prince. He gave her a rose-engraved signet ring with the promise that it would help them meet again in the future, though she admits her memory on this is a bit foggy. She doesn't even quite remember what her prince looked like. Probably not what this prince was intending. Utena didn't fall madly in love with him, per se, though she has lived out her youth in anticipation of one day meeting him. Instead, she decides that she will one day also become a prince like him, to save the imperiled princesses of the world, just as the Rose Prince had once saved her. You really don't have any idea how important this is until like the last 5 episodes, maybe even the last 2. Until then, it simply seems to be a backstory that drives Utena to enroll in the prestigious and exclusive Otori Academy. There, she is the source of wonder for the girls.
I mean, it is definitely implied to be prestigious. Is there anything that implies that it is necessarily exclusive?
A source of envy.
No, Landon, I agree. He's definitely never seen this fucking show. He's reading. He's never seen any of the shows he's mentioned. I don't know if he's seen a show. I think this motherfucker has seen Disney movies, and that's about it.
All the boys, and a source of confusion for all the teachers. She acts and dresses like a boy and is noted for her fierce sense of justice and dignified nobility.
She really doesn't
Spying
dress
as
like a
shy
boy,
and
though.
reclusive
No
Anthy
other boy
Hinamiya being
dresses like
slapped by
that
her
in the
boyfriend,
show.
she intervenes on what she believes is Anthy's behalf.
I challenge you to a duel.
Anthy is a piece
I would
in a very
describe her as a
complicated game of
butch
chess
femme.
that focuses around this school's enigmatic student council. This befits a beloved anime trope of the high school student council holding a position of political power that can rival a small government. Anthy has a secret double life as the Rose Bride, and the student council is so interested in her because the Rose Bride is the key to unlocking a power that can revolutionize the world. The one who is engaged to the
Yeah, no, like the thing he's wearing, the coat is cool. The coat could match the hat. The tie, he should have done a bow tie. He should have same color bow tie. I promise this would be
the Rose
fine.
Bride can access this power and bring about revolution,
Even with the
presumably to
douchey
suit their
hair.
own whims. The Rose Bride becomes engaged to whomever can best her current betrothed in a duel. Utena wins a duel with the student council vice president to stop him from hitting Anthy, so Utena becomes Anthy's new groom-to-be. Just works like that. And this makes sense compared to everything that follows it. Don't worry, it gets weirder. The key to these duels are the signet rings, which, at present, only members of the student council wear. The student council is not pleased
Tombi
that they've
Shonen.
lost their ability to shape the world
I've never
of the
seen
future,
that
and seek to get Anthy
phrase.
back from Utena, with the help, or perhaps at the whim, of a mysterious benefactor.
More of a
codenamed
butchy femme than a
End of
femme
the
butch.
World.
Yeah, that's
The Japanese version is
I
more
agree with
clearly
that.
translated to Apocalypse, I'm told, but was not used in English.
Arguably, she's more butch in the movie. Yeah, she's definitely more boyish. She's almost more of a trans boy in the movie. I would say, like, she comes off more like she's deliberately trying to look boyish in the movie. I don't think that comes off in the anime. I think she's more like, well, what makes this boyish? In the movie, she's more just like, yeah, I'm a prince. You know, like I am cosplaying a prince.
Because of the apparent close ties to religious overtones.
Nanami, you like girls more than boys?
Yes.
Listen, Nanami. God created men and women for a reason. That reason being that they join in the best sort of way. No matter how good something may feel, going against God's plan is...
What are you implying, big brother? You know you're the only one that I love.
Utena, through her close connection and apparent engagement to Anthy, works at coaching Anthy to think for herself. An unfortunate drawback of the Rose Bride is that the Rose Bride can only ever do or feel the way that she is instructed to by her betrothed. Even
It's not that she can only feel that way. She can only... No, it's not even can. She's just decided that it's best to... She's just purely in defense mode. If you really understand Anthy, she's a woman who has seen enough abuse that she is not going to question anything. Even when she doesn't question anything, she gets hit. Like at an untold level of abuse.
as her bridegroom, Utena tirelessly coaches Anthy to advocate for her own needs and her own feelings, and to do what she wants.
That's
rather
more
than what her
accurate.
magical husband
But
person to be
not...
tells her.
It's not that
I'm
she
sure tops of
can't.
all genders
She obviously is like seething in the background for most of the show. Like once you know her real story and you rewatch the show, you can see her just like not being able to say what she thinks all the time. People are like asking her questions and she's just kind of staring at them sadly, like she might as well be holding up an NDA sign.
can identify with both the irony and endless struggle of trying to coax their bottoms into being less subservient. In the first arc, we see the various reasons
what?
he tells her. I'm sure tops of all genders can identify with both the irony and endless struggle of trying to coax their bottoms into being less subservient. Advocate for her own needs and her own feelings, and to do what she wants rather than what her magical husband person to be tells her. I'm sure tops of all genders can identify
I'm sure tops of all genders can identify
with both the irony and endless struggle of trying
with both the irony and endless struggle
to coax their bottoms into
of
being
trying to coax their bottoms
less subservient.
into being less subservient. So this is obviously a personal experience. I assume James is a bottom. He has the most power bottom energy of anybody I've ever heard of. I can't imagine him being a top. What top is looking for a less subservient bottom? Is this something that James has had to, has he been trying to get his bottom to be? Surely not, right? He's too subservient and his top has been trying to make him less, but he's too into being a bottom. I mean, also, if you put it perfectly, self-report. It's such a weird thing. Like, and it's so weird to frame that like, and absolutely everyone's experienced this. You're just like, wait a minute, no, that cannot be every top's experience. Especially when he uses the word coax. You don't positively coax people. That's not like coaxing. It has a, I don't know. To me, there's a connotation of something like convince is a positive word. Coax is like I had to bribe you.
In the first arc, we see the various reasons that the members of the student council would want to use the power of revolution. Her winning streak against all of them is brought to an end when the student council president, Toga, tricks Utena into believing that he is the Rose Prince from her childhood. Though after Utena finds her courage again, she defeats him handedly. The first arc is privy to a number of
Handedly? It's not even a word. It's not even a word.
oddities outside of the premise of dueling in the
Oddities
upside-down
indeed.
floating castle in the sky where eternity lies with the power to bring revolution to the world. Toga's younger sister, Nanami, seems to have a bit of a complex, like a very strong fixation that by far exceeds protective. But don't worry, it does get weirder. The first arc does a lot.
I feel like he watched a lot of videos about Utena. And what I read into this is that whoever wrote parts of this for him left notes on the side that explain what those sentences mean so that he can read them more confidently. In the script, implication Nanami is in love with her brother. That's what it says in the note. And so James is delivering this like, this is going to prove how much I totally have seen this show because I know that Nanami's fixated on her brother. But nobody who has seen this show would be this blasé about describing Nanami. Gary always, of course, this is paid for. You think I just watched a James Somerton video? What the fuck are you talking about? You watch this show and your take on Nanami is like, she's a bit fixated. She's a fucking psycho bitch that takes up all the best parts of the show.
A lot of the heavy lifting in terms of establishing the rules.
What does just James do now? Nobody really, I assume he has a day job or something, or he's just got enough money saved up. He has come back, like he's made videos again, I think, probably living with his parents like I am, if I had to guess.
The world and the themes running through the whole series. Subsequent plot arcs just get deeper and more unsettling. The second arc doesn't really do much to elaborate on the plot, though it is important for establishing some guiding mechanics of this world, as well as introducing some key players for the ongoing series. Through a plot devised to kill the Rose Bride and replace her, we see a recurrence of the same weapons the student council used to challenge Utena. We had seen the Sword of Dio.
This is going to take so long to watch. Let's just speed it up. He doesn't talk that quickly. At least 1.5.
A powerful weapon and the key to the power of revolution being removed from Anthe's chest in her capacity as the Rose Bride, and this seems to be her primary role as the Rose Bride. Just as Anthe's body hosts the Sword of Dios initially, each student council member hosts their own blade. In the third arc, however, Anthe no longer is host to the Sword of Dios. Instead, she draws a blade from Utena's body. That's important. Keep that in mind. We can get to it later. The other primary element of the second arc is introducing Anthe's brother, Akio. Hey, if you thought Nanami and Toga stuff was a little weird, we got a couple episodes into the second arc with Akio and Anthe, and like, yeah, they're
Yeah, again, it feels like he has read notes about the show.
Come here.
Like, he understands that he is talking about incest, but he's like watched videos that showed the clips. I just don't think you can talk about a show like this if you have felt it through the experience of watching it. This is the way I talk about shows that I know about but haven't seen. Like, if I was describing the plot of Alien and I've only seen like 30 minutes of the movie, I would talk about it like this.
I really don't want another content strike from YouTube. I already have one. So as graphic as this is, I am simply going to euphemize and refer to it as domestic abuse. Akio is the principal villain of the series.
Escryed. That is a great example. Sukuraido,
and was both end of the world as well as the Rose Prince who gave Utena her ring, which, drawing a parallel to Utena's duel with Toga, Akio's primary objective seems to be to feminize Utena and groom her. Because Utena is under the impression that
See, like, that's accurate, but that sounds like somebody else's analysis.
she's basically promised herself to the prince from her childhood. She is magnetic.
How does this compare to my analysis? Nothing similar at all. There's just so much to say about Utena. Like, all this kind of surface level shit, this feels like somebody literally read the Wikipedia article and watched a couple analysis videos and kind of like cobbled together an idea of what people think about Utena. Gary, we will definitely check out Kiwi after we finish this long-ass James Somerton video.
Anthi to fester due to being so gaslit her whole life that she feels her only sense of value is to be of service to men, something that toxic rivalry.
I put a lot of poison in your tea.
And yeah, he has so far literally
As
just
one does,
described
the girls appear to
the
resolve the
show.
differences when Utena rescues Anthi from an unaliving attempt and acknowledges that.
But
they
we
were
are
kinda
early into
completely
the
fucked
video.
up.
Like, the structure of his videos, like, he's clearly going through the show kind of quickly and like broadly. I think he will start to get into something he thinks is meaningful soon.
For a final stab at gaslighting Utena into believing that it's her time to shed her juvenile boyish fantasies and be a proper lady.
I am enjoying watching this. Not only do I enjoy shitting on bad YouTube videos, but I like James Somerton. Yeah, this video is fucking terrible, but it doesn't mean I don't like this guy as a person. All right, let's get back to James Somerton, shall we?
Him, and presumably by extension society at large.
I
Utena
forgot I had this on
challenges Akio
1.5.
to a duel for Anthi's fate. Akio basically says that the dueling rules are different now. A, because he'll straight up murder her if she loses, and B, because the dueling arena may or may not have existed and may have been a hologram this whole time, but don't worry, we've yet to hit the summit of Weird Mountain. Guarding Anthi from her brother, Utena is stabbed in the back by Anthi, who upon the command of her brother, has accepted that it's simply her own
Spoilers.
life to suffer. According to a man who has been domestically abusing his own sister for who knows how long, Akio claims that she has chosen this, and that she's happy like this.
And now she actually enjoys living in this pathetic, tortured role. She can no longer be happy.
Oh god, the dub.
Looking at real-world parallels,
The Utena dub is very bad. Like, that's not the worst performance in it, but it's very bad.
a given individual can endure much less debilitating physical and psychological trauma and be ruled as unfit
Utena deserves a new dub. Utena actually does deserve a whole new dub.
the state to make their own decisions. There are a number of other hints and instances in the plot that strongly indicate that Anthi's willpower is so eroded
Ava
that she
got
has
a
no
new
sense of
dub.
self-preservation
Utena
whatsoever,
needs
and is
a new
emotionally
dub.
stunted to the point where she needs people to make decisions for her because she does not know how to think for herself. Something that Utena has been trying to get her to realize about herself this whole time. With Anthi being stabbed by the swords of hatred, probably men's hatred, it's symbolic or not, we'll talk about it. Akio takes the sword from Utena and tries to open the door that guards the power to revolutionize the world, and finally, oops, it broke. Not that it really matters. What can you possibly get for the man who has everything? Whiskey stones? It's not like any of this really mattered. It's fine. Utena, meanwhile,
The
desperately
new Ava dub sucked though, but that's because it didn't need one. I'm just saying, if Utena even had a semi-competent dub, it would go over better. Like, the dub is bad. Not like a 4Kids, like bad, so bad it's funny. It's just bad. It's just like,
claws at the rose thorns that guard the power of revolution, and a sheer refusal to give up on Anthi, for which I'm sure there's a heterosexual explanation somehow. And in a final attempt to free Anthi from the coffin of her psyche, the floor gives out, and Utena is left wounded, defeated, and at the mercy of all the swords that Akio forced upon Anthi, so that they would not attack him. Flash forward a few weeks, and Utena is not in school, and all of the students have begun to forget her, save for Anthi and Akio. The latter is disappointed that Utena never managed to use the power to revolutionize the world, and begins a new scheme to try it all again. Anthi, however, declares that she'll have no part of this, and next to a bewildered brother, announces that she's leaving Otori Academy to find Utena. The manga and the movie have some vast
I
differences.
forgot how
but
cute she
maintain
looks
overall
at the
themes.
end.
This is primarily going to cover the anime, but we'll include some elements of the movie in order to elaborate on themes. Because on top of what I just narrated, there's a whole mythology and some magic realism and anatomy in general that is going on at the same time. And specifically in the realm of magic realism, the sword of Dios himself, the upside down castle, Anthi's magic and backstory as a witch, and a whole lot more.
Editing
I am going to
gags.
drop some bombs because my reading of Revolutionary Girl Utena seems to be vastly different than the bulk of the discourse I've found. Not to mention the actual Wikipedia page. And sure, you could take it literally. You could assume that Dios was
Not to mention, I read all of this on Wikipedia.
the former
I totally didn't watch this at all.
incarnation of Akio, who was transformed / imprisoned by Anthi, who is a witch, a damsel in distress, and also simultaneously the vestige of all men's hatred, who desperately want Prince.
Yeah, sorry that James is spoiling the entire ending of Utena here, but Ellen decided to base her life schedule too much on my life schedule. And since We Watch Anime did not finish the show, everyone else watched ahead, but Ellen was dedicated to doing it with us. We never finished. So you can blame me.
The realm of normal
Kind
for
of.
anime. Or we can observe Revolutionary Girl Utena as a deeply allegorical and symbolic story about the struggles of coming of age amidst widespread institutional corruption in a high school, and which describes a passive culture in action in regard to brazen instances of domestic exploitation, in which there is not only a question about the corporeality of the events transpiring, but also which events can be taken for granted, and which events are meant to signify abstract sociological institutions which may be otherwise difficult to articulate in fiction, which is, quite frankly, a lot more effort. But unfortunately, we have postmodernism, so I guess we have to try.
I don't know what that little jam was, but I liked that.
is a literary, artistic, and philosophical school of thought. Something Wikipedia uses as a word. What you need to know is that postmodernism is a response to the modernism movement, which hit its peak in the 1920s.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus fucking Christ. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Oh, man. This is the last place I needed this video to go. We just finished the recapping the show and its legacy part of the video. So now we're entering the I'm going to start making points about Utena part. And the way we've started that is with attempting to explain the entire concept of postmodernism. But instead of actually going into what it is, assuming you either know or don't care, and therefore trying to summarize it like this.
Something Wikipedia uses big words. What you
Something Wikipedia uses big words. Man's never looked up postmodernism before this video. My homie, you are doing literary criticism. You're in your 30s and you've never heard of postmodernism until you had to read a fucking Wikipedia page for a Revolutionary Girl Utena video. You know where I heard the best explanation of postmodernism ever? A PT Cruiser car review. This is what being able to write sounds like.
Postmodernism rejects the notion that any text or product or media is inherently more valuable than any other. Culture is a snake eating its own tail. Everything old is new again. Everything deserves to be viewed as art. Everything deserves an audience to consume it, whether it's this PT Cruiser, the new Ghostbusters, Golden Axe for the Sega Genesis, or even this review, or this fart that's brewing.
That's how you bring postmodernism into a video. Here's how James Somerton handles bringing postmodernism into the conversation about Revolutionary Girl Utena, a deeply postmodern anime.
Postmodernism is a literary, artistic, and philosophical school of thought. Something Wikipedia uses big words. What you need to know is
Something Wikipedia uses big words. Imagine citing Wikipedia and complaining about how Wikipedia is above your head. Who is supposed to be the audience for your video essay content?
that postmodernism is a response to the modernism movement, which hit its peak in the 1920s. It's complicated. There was a lot of overlap, especially when
It's
looking at areas of study which
complicated.
began to shift away from the modernist
Just
movement.
don't
Architecture.
say things you have to defend if you have to make a brush defense. You don't know what you're talking about.
First area significantly adapt a style that would be referred to as postmodern. In contrast to the modernists, postmodernism is rooted
Just like shows a building here. This is postmodern.
heavily in relativism and implores a rejection of stable and concrete, let alone universal truths. Due to the focus around ephemerality, identity, and especially the ways that identity may be concealed or altered in a world which is chronically changing, Revolutionary Girl Utena conforms miraculously to this school of thought. And quite frankly, it seems to be
Miraculously, not like definitely on purpose. Almost exclusively trying to do it as hard as possible. Like, what if we made the most postmodern anime we ever possibly could? Like, that's probably a conversation that was had at some point.
a shining exemplar of presenting these tenets in a way that is clear, though compelling enough, to be more than just a textbook case. This is considered one of the most significant and influential
But also a textbook case.
animes of the 90s for a very good reason. Now, it's easy to see how this
Bro, this postmodernism could fit so many buildings and Utenas in it. Thank you, Aura. I'm gonna leave that up for a
anime
bit.
fits into a postmodern framework from the theme alone. You've got a bunch of teenagers who are not only struggling with ways to project their true selves into the world, but also struggling to reconcile what that true self even is. There's an ongoing discussion about gender, developing sexuality, coming of age, direct and indirect challenges to established values, a question of truth versus illusion, a distrust of therapy that feels at home with Scientology, and ultimately a threat of losing oneself in a sea of modernity. That's lowercase modernity, by the way. Prominent in postmodern writing are unreliable narrators, imagery of mirrors, masks, being trapped in liminal spaces, a use of glitter to describe seemingly important things.
Being trapped in liminal spaces is now postmodern? Why? How? What? How?
Little value, and a strong prominence of feminist ideals and themes, given that postmodernism, not to be confused with post-modernity,
What
which is a
the
different
fuck
thing,
does
kind of,
that
seems to hold a
mean? You just had to bring up liminal spaces. Like, he's somewhere in the research of the word postmodernism, he saw the words liminal spaces came up and was like, liminal spaces in there, a whole video about that.
particular focus on the appearance versus reality of something, and also challenging the belief of objective truth. Second wave feminism
Ellen said, you know, it's funny. James can say anything he wants, no matter how dumb, and you can't blame him because it might be stolen. No, it's not true, because if you haven't seen Todd in the Shadows video, everything he didn't steal, he made up. Like, there's as much made up stuff as there is stolen stuff. So, like, you got H Bomber's guy's video where he breaks down all the stolen stuff, and then Todd, his video basically researches every single thing that he didn't steal, and it's all whole cloth made up. It's all one or the other. That's the fun of it. So you can either assume, like, if he says something that you're like, that sounds kind of almost correct, you're like, okay, he probably stole that. If you hear something that you're like, wait, what the fuck did you just say? Like the thing about the tops, where he's like, every top has definitely experienced trying to coerce their bottom into being less subservient. What? Like, all of us, everybody in the chat simultaneously went, I have a question.
Very at home when postmodern thought made its way into literature. By the 1960s, the two could often be spoken of in the same breath. They both drew roots from the rise of existentialist thought that endured the Second World War, spurred by an intellectual school of thought that placed importance on the self, and developing a sense of self-worth based on action rather than birthright or strictly through labor. Also,
everything he's saying right now makes sense to me because I just listened to regular car reviews explain this in a way that made sense. But I can't imagine listening to that word salad he just said if I didn't know what postmodernism is and coming away with any understanding of it. This is nothingness. Yeah, this word salad needs more ranch. I agree, Anonymous. We've only had one like true aside, like true peek into James's mind so far.
Existentialism was a primary influence for Ayn Rand and her school of objectivism. Still, an ongoing trend within stories with a female lead was that...
Amy, I was a fan of his. I was subscribed. I think I started following him because of a Yuri on Ice video he did. To me, it just seemed like, yeah, this is a cool video. I remember sharing it on like Facebook, and, you know, other friends of mine who watch analytical videos enjoyed it. Again, I never thought he was perfect, but I don't have high expectations of analytical videos. So I didn't think he was right 100% of the time, but I liked the content. I like his presentation. I think he's got a good voice. Again, I like his power bottom energy. I think he can be repurposed into a good YouTuber. But this is the kind of content that I would throw on while I'm like smoking bowl after bowl and checking Twitter. I'm not in this sphere of the internet. Like, I was trying to get more into like a gay YouTube through this guy. And the only reason, I think the reason his content worked is because he was stealing all of it. He could talk about everything. And my assumption was he spent a month doing research. And I remember a point where he was putting out videos so fast. I remember literally thinking, I can't believe how fast James Somerton can make these videos. He was putting a video like every 2 weeks for a while that are like these 50-minute analysis videos. I'm like, I don't even think I could do that. Now I know why. It's all stolen. When all this information came out, it felt like the synapses in my brain were all connecting. Like the bigger picture I'd been ignoring because I'm just looking at little pieces of it all came into view, and it was like, oh, it all makes sense. His streams were so boring. He would just kind of be quietly like reading chat. Like he would read what chat said and then maybe have like a short reply, but most of the time he's just sitting there waiting for somebody to give him something to respond to. And I always thought he was like an attention whore and a narcissist and a power bottom. But again, I like that. I like the brattiness that he's like a queen and a diva. Like, again, I think we could relaunch this person's career because he doesn't need to be a journalist. He's a bad journalist. Nobody disagrees about that. He just needs to apologize and, you know, promise never to try to be taken seriously again.
In order to frame the narrative towards emotional validation, the narrative needed to contain the typical postmodern elements of social destabilization, which leads us back to Utena, where the very plot is about revolution and whether or not a tomboyish young girl has the ability or the right to be responsible for it. But you're here for the hot takes, right? What does this have to do with that?
Guess.
Throughout Utena, there is both an element of magic realism juxtaposed against the reality of high school drama. In spite of the fact that these are high school students, they fight grand fencing duels in a stadium in the
It just keeps like saying words that describe the show in vague terms, but don't add to my understanding of it.
Where an inverted castle floats above. The student council...
He needed a strong-willed top like Bird to fight dumb people in chat. Yeah, that's probably true. You know, I'm always surprised by how at arm's length other creators keep like their editors and co-writers and stuff like that, because when I work with somebody, I'm always like very all in. Like with Devu, I would literally just send the scripts and then get a video back. I know the co-writer has kind of tried to act like they were less involved, but it's also possible they're trying to play it off, you know, for the sake of escaping criticism. I haven't looked too much into their whole situation, but I watched the H-Bomber guy, and the Todd in the Shadows video was the one that really got to me, because it's one thing to steal, it's another thing to just make shit up.
Has this anxious anticipation about their ability to self-actualize and anxieties about growing up, while at the same time carrying the kind of weight and authority one would expect from feudal politics. It's like Game of Thrones with miniskirts. In my reading of Utena...
No, it is not. It is not at all in any fucking way like Game of Thrones with miniskirts. It's just not. It's not at all like Game of Thrones. I cannot think of one single similarity other than there are people in competition for power. That's it.
There is very little that we can verifiably say is not symbolic or directly
Exactly.
allegorical.
That's the kind of comment I'd say when I haven't watched the show. Exactly. It's just like Rick and Morty with mini stuff.
This anime incorporates nearly every significant icon of postmodern language. It would be wrong to assume that this is not deeply allegorical. What, are we just going to take the Dios stuff seriously when it serves the plot much more significantly to say that the background mythology...
Oh, and then he has the nerve to like talk about the show flippantly like he's been in the community for years. What are we, us Utena fans, just going, oh, it's so gross.
Is meant to characterize the way these characters interact.
Yeah,
My reading of this media is that there isn't a whole lot we can take at face value, and much more that we can assume is...
He's got such a smug fucking look on his face when he does it. Like, he looks like he's excited to be lying.
Fantastical illusion meant to convey deeper meaning about what the author has to say about power, abuse, control, schooling, and adolescence in general. Especially because the final 2 episodes strongly...
Ooh, I get to say so many buzzwords in a row talking about this show. Ugh, this is going to give me so many views.
...why, even misleadingly, that everything...
Somerton be like, Utena is a neo-philosophical private take on gender complex dynamics. Key example, the power bottom that needs to actualize herself. It's like every time he says anything that is original, it's just about him. And then everything else he says, he sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about, which is how you know he's taking it from somewhere.
Fantastical about this story, from the duels, the castle, the power of Dios, was an illusion projected by holograms. Though in the same breath where Akio explains that people see a castle because they're too naive to see the power of the chairman's residence, they see the more literal power of a castle. Akio doesn't seem to question himself at all and whether or not the chairman's...
That's a really cool shot.
office is an illusion he is choosing to see. In a discourse on power, it's very heavily implied that the chairman's...
An illusion he is choosing to see? It's not an illusion if you choose to see it, is it?
authority is representative of a broader definition of higher authority. Evidence of his own self-deception.
Oh, by the way, this is just fucking gobbledygook. What he's saying does not formulate a point about this show.
Is that he too buys into the fantasy of the power of Dios, which seems to reside exclusively in this room of illusions. And therefore, where he failed to breach the door to that power with a sword he drew from Utena's chest, Utena accomplishes this all on her own. So if we are dealing with a plot that is primarily an illusion, then how are we supposed to interpret what was going on at all? And more importantly, what does it all mean? The weird thing about an analysis like this is that you kind of have to gauge what this anime is actually about before you begin to look for supporting instances. Something
kind of have to gauge what this anime is about. Sure, yeah, if you're fucking an idiot, I guess.
Tricky about Utena is that some things are allegorically coded and other things are meant to be taken at face value. It's not always clear which is meant to be which. A basic premise is that Utena Tenju is a middle school student.
I don't think Utena is like as veiled. Like, it's weird. It's not hard to understand. I feel like actually it just beats you over the head with the point so flagrantly that it goes like it's unusual because it's so blatant.
Who is struggling to navigate adolescence. If we assume that this is real, as the more universal experience the young lady can expect.
It's dreamlike. I don't think this is supposed to be not literally happening. It wouldn't make sense if it was real, but that's not the point. Utena is best understood as a stage play. It has a Grecian chorus, for fuck's sake.
In her life, then all elements outside the realm of normal can be seen as symbolic reflections of struggles that middle school students will go through, especially because all discourse around the duels and the Rose Bride and the floating castle in the sky are not accessible to most of the student body. Only the student council and a handful of students know about these things. The rest of the students are just students. This creates a broad yet clearly defined separation between the fantastical events and the literal ones. And this is also primarily why I prefer the anime to the movie. The separation between reality and...
I think it's preferable to think of it as like actors versus extras.
Illusion is a little bit more defined. Whereas in the movie, Adolescence of Utena, students participated in these duels as the audience. It makes the symbolism of everything around Anthe a little bit more literal, except when you get to the whole cars thing. That said, the movie was much less about the question of identity and more about escaping the oppressive elements of conformity in school. The movie itself, I view as more of a companion piece to the anime, beefing up secondary thematic messaging that was present in the anime and clarifying some character motivations.
You view as, Wikipedia views as.
Since Toga's romantic feelings for Utena were genuine, and that Shiori really is just that.
It's hard to tell if the surfing elephants are literal or allegorical. Yeah, exactly.
Though Utena's revamped design was a great improvement, I felt. Granted, the whole movie is just gorgeous. Painting the school as an MC Escher-esque prison of militant conformity. It's also just a lot gayer. There's a reason why I chose to focus on the anime specifically. Both the film and the manga are worth their own analysis each. The only major overlapping symbol is that cars represent adulthood and passage into adulthood. The problem with...
Not necessarily. I don't think all cars represent adulthood. I don't think that's nearly the only thing they represent. They represent freedom and expression and different ways that people express them. Like, Akio's car is different from Utena's car. They don't represent the same thing.
With postmodern analysis is that symbolic language and what is presented as real events can often be overlapping.
The one thing that's obvious is this bullshit I'm saying.
An element of realism is important in most stories, as most audiences need these real events to identify within their own lives in order to empathize with the characters. There is a degree of uncertainty when gauging analysis, and the temptation to assume that everything is symbolic,
Stop saying gauging like that. You're not using the word right.
which I feel gives a lot of undue complexity to work that is otherwise meant to just be straightforward. To bring up an example nobody's going to expect, and I mean nobody, look at the music video for
God.
Wrecking Ball by Miley
This is so unnecessary.
Cyrus. I do like Miley, but this one was a bit of a miss.
I do
She responded
like
to criticism of the
Miley,
video,
but
describing it as weird and unnecessary by claiming that the whole lick in the hammer thing was symbolic of a failed relationship or something. A problem with the video is that it is under the assumption that the audience is going to read these visuals as symbolic.
I
without the
don't
music
know what the controversy was, and you're not explaining it to me, so I'm really kind of lost on this.
video itself doing anything to suggest that these things are symbolic. The
I
lyrics
never
also
saw
don't
this
do a whole
music
lot to play off of
video.
the house-breaking imagery of a wrecking ball besides that one line. The end result is a weird sexual tryst with inanimate construction site objects, which seems to be playing off of nothing but the song. But
How? Okay, even just based on what you're saying, the imagery is a wrecking ball tearing apart a room. How does that not imply the destruction of like a home state?
that's a creator assuming that their audience will read symbolism into their work without prompt.
Oh my god. This is what people think. People think you need to be prompted to assume that there is symbolism in a work. Totally asinine.
Can work in the other direction too. Taking Lord of the Rings as an example, and this is entirely hypothetical, it would be like saying that Aragorn kicking the orc helmet and crying out in anguish is symbolic of his rejection of regal responsibilities resulting in the suffering of those around him.
It is.
No, he's kicking a helmet
It
because he's
is.
frustrated that he's misplaced his hobbits, and screaming
It's
because
both.
Viggo Mortensen accidentally broke his foot.
That's
kicking that
why
helmet.
you don't just specify random details in a story that don't mean anything and don't symbolize anything about the characters. That's bad writing. Tolkien is a unfathomably symbolic writer. He didn't put anything in there that didn't mean anything. You people are just stupider than him. I can't fucking believe this. This is next level bad. I'm really glad nobody takes this guy seriously as a critic anymore.
Now, if the plot made a specific point of Aragorn repeatedly kicking or pushing objects away from him with due consequences, then yes, we could say that this action carries symbolic weight, but only if
Somebody had to have watched this and just screamed at this and been like, James, you cannot release this.
it's repeated, and only if, through repetition, the audience can see evolution in Aragorn's internal conflict. And unfortunately, there aren't any solid rules about the verb an action or element as symbolic, and when we should dismiss it as taken for granted.
God.
Because if you want to establish a rule, then some author at some point in history has made a masterpiece textbook example of a symbolic device that breaks that rule. The primary reason that AI will never
Yeah,
be able to replace
so
artists
what?
is because the collection of values that are used to present literary
We're talking about AI now, dude. He fit every fucking buzz term into this video. This is a wild ride. This is a really wild ride.
devices can shift
He released this on his Patreon? Oh no. Oh no.
from one artist to the next. It's a matter of merit to have the kind of creative judgment to discern how an audience will interpret literary devices. And in the language of each individual author, there is a variable ability to present meaning in variable ways, using variable methods. TLDR.
Good God, dude. This is the worst like spaghetti of language I have heard in some time.
If there's a rule,
This might be worse than that Lily Orchard video, actually.
then it would not be art. The quality of an artist is gauged by their ability not only to make their own rules, but to efficiently project that set of rules to their audience.
No, it's
we live in a
not.
world where
What the
Watchmen,
fuck are
Carrie,
you
Slaughterhouse
talking
5, and The
about?
Color Purple
The name dropping is unreal.
are all considered postmodern masterpieces. Yet their syntactic mechanics,
You have not seen any of those shows, James.
narrative structure, and even their very underlying philosophies are foundationally different.
Syntactic
Though in
structure.
Utena, there seems to
Shut the fuck up.
be one side character who is able to appropriately frame the realism from the symbolism, though she's in less than about half the total episodes. Utena's best friend, Wakaba, is
I'm still willing to work with you, James, but you can never do criticism again. You need to apologize for all of this.
the most important character for discerning what is meant to be symbolic. Wakaba is a regular girl who's
A little incredibly gay.
and not at all involved in the component of
Wakaba's not even gay.
dueling that takes place in the school.
Like, that's her problem.
Wakaba sees conflict between the duelists, but not the duels themselves.
Oh, my brain
She's the cipher
hurts.
character with whom the audience can appreciate what the average student would see. I would argue that whatever Wakaba sees is what the audience can take for granted is the reality of what's transpiring. Everything else, including very personal moments, such as Anthe's attempted unaliving, and even including things that happen in the real world, such as a school teacher sexually exploiting his female students, can be read as symbolic representations of something more abstract. And even if we do read those aforementioned issues as real, that doesn't also mean that they can't carry additional symbolic value to a larger abstract concept. They're just very well developed concepts. And because of Wakaba, we can approach them with uncertainty rather than confusion. This is the principle of my
What
thoughts on
do
Attack on
you
Titan,
mean by
where I felt
that?
that things that fans and detractors argued were symbolic were just too messy and inconsistent and contradictory to be set in stone allegories. Okay, this is a world where people can get bone marrow injections and turn into
Oh
giant monsters
boy,
who,
here we
depending on the
go.
circumstances,
Attack on Titan time. He really can't stop bringing other shit into this that he also doesn't understand.
may or may not have sentient reasoning based on an ambiguous rule of genetic heritage, but also magic too. At this point, if anything goes world building, Attack on Titan goes out of its way to establish that weird shit happens in this world and can be accepted as fact rather than allegory.
Is he trying to use the fact that Attack on Titan doesn't make sense as his excuse for why he doesn't have to try to make sense of Revolutionary Girl Utena? That's what I'm hearing right now, is this show is so symbolically driven that nobody really understands what it's about. Kind of like Attack on Titan. What? No, it's not the fucking same thing.
Whereas Revolutionary Girl Utena does not do that, which is something you could accept about Utena, except for Wakaba, who, yes, participates in one duel, but she was brainwashed and has no recollection of it. Wakaba is the element of normal in this cast. Things that happen in her awareness are certain. Wakaba is like us, the audience. We don't pull weaponry out of random people or have uncommon hair colors. I'm sorry. Almost none of us are main characters in an anime. And therefore, what happens outside of Wakaba's awareness is subject to discourse,
God, he can't stop with the fucking little asides that don't mean anything.
untruth, or illusion. Because of Wakaba, we can read some of the more weird things in this plot as symbolic and not just absurd. Not that Utena doesn't have some absurd things, but even something
No,
seemingly benign
We can
and
do that
useless-
because it's obviously what you would do reading any fucking show, not because of Wakaba. Wakaba doesn't contribute anything to your ability to read this as symbolic. It means fucking nothing. It means fucking nothing. This is so asinine.
ridiculously cute, like Choo Choo, serves to help characterize Anthe as a sympathetic character who is earnest in her sensitivity rather than it being a front to help her brother groom girls at the school. Cares about animals is the tried and true method in anime of signifying that the audience ought to empathize with a given character.
Yeah, we get it. You've read a TV tropes page. He's definitely read the TV tropes page on top of the Wikipedia article. Like wherever there's information collated, he's read that.
Eating that mean old snake?
But there's a lot more to dig into than simple symbology.
Okay. You didn't dig into any simple symbology. You justified the idea of digging into symbology.
Probably the most prominent symbol in the entire show is the Sword of Dios. Aside from being the key that gives access to the power of revolution, it is made symbolic by how it is acquired. It being removed from Anthe's chest can be
Made
read as symbolic rather
symbolic.
than your average magical
Because a sword isn't just inherently symbolic.
world transformation stock footage. It's very easy in any work of
God.
fiction to observe weapons as symbols of power. This is almost universal. What's a little more creative is when a creator questions what a weapon is. So given that a small yet significant collection of the student body run around spontaneously pulling swords out of their
Actually,
testicles,
spear
this isn't something that
probably
we
is
can really
more than
dismiss.
sword.
The
but
power to
you get what I
revolutionize the
mean.
world is hidden behind a gate for which the Sword of Dios is the key to access. In order to get this power, duelists, usually men, need to extract this power from the body of a woman. However, they do not possess this power on their own. They need a woman as an accessory to their ambitions, even if the ambition is to protect the woman. Granted, it probably should not get
But it doesn't have to be a woman. There's been swords pulled out of men in the show too.
lost on us that Dios means God in Latin and a number of other Romance languages. Even in the Japanese language versions, he's called Dios. And I'm not going to get too deep into that, especially with the language of apocalypse and revolution. That's a whole master's degree dissertation right there. However, the figure of Dios as a character is important to the plot, and in my opinion, a rather contentious one. A surface level reading of Dios is that he is either a god, a reflection of a god, a prince who died ages ago, or a collection of household insects given material.
Why
form
are
by
any of
depending
those?
on the version of the
What
story.
makes any of those surface level? Those are just readings. They just are readings. There's not levels of the readings.
Now, yes, if you want to, you can look at him like that, and that who he was is now a specter.
How fucking smug he looks. You could read it like that if you're a fucking idiot. If you're a stupid dweeb who didn't read as many analysis posts as I did, fucking idiot. This is consensus.
That resides in the sword and or castle. He is the figure who gave Utena her signet ring and inspired her to become a prince. And he is not Akio, though can be read as and is occasionally a reflection of Akio. For all that Dios is approached with the language of the Christian god, Akio's name is derived from a Japanese character used in the name for Venus, the morning star, which is associated with Lucifer. Lucifer, which is, dare I say, a misappropriated name for Satan. Lucifer instead originally referred to a Persian god of the morning light.
Why do we need these details? It's hard to watch this because he throws so many barbs at you. This is why it's 56 fucking minutes long.
And Satan actually means the accuser, not the devil. He was God's prosecutor,
Who
not his
fucking
enemy.
cares?
Frenemies! But anyway,
Who
religion and
cares?
anime, fun. So yes, the literal reading is there, but that's boring when there's so much symbolism afoot. Dios is simply
You're
a
right,
word
it is
tool to explain
boring.
the
Holy
motivations of characters
shit.
that do exist than as a character himself.
Oh
When a
my
character is a character
God.
but is not a character, but represents an internal character
And
foil
a
that
character
pretends
is
to
a
be their identity,
character, but is not a character, but represents a character.
that may be a figurative mask, but mask nevertheless. So Dios doesn't exist, not strictly. He exists as a concept given a name. The concept is nobility, chivalry, and power. The subject of nobility is also noteworthy in Utena. The Prince of Roses as a concept seems to hold a different meaning to each character. To Utena, the prince is the archetype of the nobility.
I'm not gonna like try to deconstruct every part of this because I haven't rewatched the ending of Utena to be able to say with confidence what Dios is. I'm sure it's not whatever he's saying because he just makes up so much. Like it's like a constant left turns.
She wants to represent. One may even say a transition icon if you want to adopt that reading of Utena. However,
No.
for additional instances
Why is she a transition icon? And then also only if you adopt that reading of Utena.
castles, princesses, damsels, and evil witches also enrich this symbolic language. The castle may be an illusion, kind of. Akio says it is, but then hinges his entire
Maybe,
plan on
kind
making it an
of.
illusion
I
to
don't
himself.
know. I didn't watch the show.
I don't know.
I don't know. He literally said, I don't know. Why is
The
this a
castle itself
video?
represents a curious
Why
spell
is this a
storytelling
video?
exercise.
He
The final leg
doesn't
of the third
know
arc heavily deals
what
with Akio attempting
he's
to convince Utena to
talking
put down the
about
sword to
at
be a proper lady,
all.
which Utena feels compelled to do. Nearly everyone who sees the upside down castle wants to go there to make all their dreams come true, whatever those dreams may be.
Everybody
It makes
who
it
sees the upside down castle wants to go there. Is there ever a part where somebody's like, I want to go up there? What is that thing? I don't think anybody even really talks about it. Sayonji doesn't even believe it's real. He says it's a trick of the light. Okay, yeah. Nobody wants to go to the fucking castle, dude. No one. At no point in the show is it ever suggested, let's go up there. What a wildly wrong, made up thing to say.
easy for someone like Akio to manipulate others under the promise that he can make those dreams a reality. What's noteworthy is that the castle is tantalizing, but it's also inaccessible.
It's not.
It is, in fact,
Maybe
only
to the
accessible through
audience.
engagement to the Rose Bride. The reality of this castle is challenged by two things. First, yes, that Akio claims that it's an illusion within an illusion.
It is.
Very Inception-y, but also that it is
Probably.
upside down. We know from the study of symbols that when a given symbol is inverted, it holds an opposing meaning. Take a castle. What does it represent? Monarchy, regality, nobility, safety, and fantasy. A castle as a symbol, if inverted, still carries those values, but instead becomes an ironic subversion of those values. It's the difference between saying a castle wall is meant to keep the bride safe, or maybe that it's meant to keep her imprisoned. An inverted castle says the latter. It's also significant
12?
that as Utena faces Akio in this climactic confrontation, she begins to understand the ways that her childhood fantasies of princes and princesses have been used to manipulate her into being just a girl. Her realization is marked by the upside-down castle's collapse. The symbolic language of this castle is a bit different in adolescence of Utena. While it seems to be a grand, magnificent castle, it's actually a giant tank underneath, whose shifting wheels and treads form a labyrinth that one is not meant to escape. And in the movie, as in the anime, Akio is directly related to this castle and the princely figure of Dios.
Oh, no shit.
This becomes more significant through the third arc. To Akio, Dios uniquely represents who he believes he is, and who he feels other people ought to see him as. An illusion he himself buys into so strongly that others also believe it. Dios' story is told several different ways by several different characters, and no story is entirely consistent.
Several
The common trend
different
in his fable, however,
characters.
is that he has a sister. He seeks a damsel in distress, and that he is tricked by a witch and imprisoned. All of these figures are anthe at the same time. Dios' imprisonment and or death as a result of the witch's actions, even though her motivations range from malicious to oblivious, seems to be what every version of this story frames as the root cause for all the world's problems.
The world still hadn't fallen completely into darkness then. The reason for this was because there was a Rose Prince.
Not only is Akio a victim for having his godhood removed, but the whole of the world is worse off for it, and that through his intention to use the power of revolution, he will re-empower himself to his rightful status as someone who has the ability to do anything he wants without consequences.
We're going to bring up any biblical allusions here. Maybe bring up some Adam, Lilith, Eve. You set us up for that, James. Are you going to head in that direction?
Going to make the world a better place.
Right?
Because returning his power to him is poetic justice, returning to him something that he lost. And all of this has been to
It
say
would make
that
sense.
the role of Dios is for Akio to
We
betray
can go
his
there.
internal motivations.
You talked about
to
Satan
others.
already.
Punishment for taking the prince away
Got a
from the
lot of
musical
setup to go
So,
biblical
through a
with
postmodern
this.
lens, we can use this to characterize Akio to offer context for his actions. In his mind, he is Dios, and his version of Dios offered himself to the world and the world's princesses, and the world was better for it. Within the shadow play, there is language to suggest that he had the ability to fight monsters to protect people. In Akio's elaboration later on in the same episode,
I don't remember there being like a Godzilla in this, or Gaber, whatever that was supposed to be.
it's subtly implied that Dios gets his power from deflowering the princesses of the world. And by the witch taking away his unbridled ability to get his dick wet, he lost his
I don't remember that. Is that a thing? Does he have to like fuck virgins to gain power? I forgot about this if that was a thing.
ability to maintain peace and order in the world. His exploitation of Anthe in that light is a means by which he can recover the power he perceives she stole from him in the most postmodern way possible. This is what I mean when I said that this might not even be literal exploitation, because this kind of demonstration can be extrapolated to indicate any kind of power imbalance in this relationship. This can signify any kind of control or abuse, but the instance of exploitation here is used because assault has deep roots, as indicating that Akio feels
Assault has deep roots, y'all.
gender is the source of
I just
imbalance.
put my name
However,
on
there
a
is also an invitation to observe this
toilet.
conflict of princes, damsels, and witches as itself representative of a greater cultural whole. The plot outlines that exploitation of all kinds is damaging, not just the sexual instances outlined here, and how in the situation of a life's worth of gaslighting, someone can actively believe that their only role in life is to be a victim. People generally feel good when they are reassured of their self existing in the world. When you have been told that your self is to be a victim over time, your brain can cross those wires. Suddenly, victimhood feels good. because you get
We're starting to get into James talking about himself again. I don't doubt that this guy has like a really fucked up past. I don't think he understands how fucked up it is. I think he like maybe thinks that other people are more similar to him than they are. I don't think he realizes how dark his own experiences have been. Maybe I'm going too deep with my read here, but that's the read I'm getting on James Somerton is he talks about what sound like really harrowing experiences, like they're something everybody has gone through. And I hear it and I'm like, oh man, no, like that sounds personal to you and bad that happened to you, like sad, you know, like not your fault. But just listen back to this part.
actual instances outlined here, and how in the situation of a life's worth of gaslighting, someone can actively believe that their only role in life is to be a victim. People generally feel good when they are reassured of their self existing in the world. When you have been told that your self is to be a victim, over time, your brain can cross those wires. Suddenly, victimhood feels good because you get that positive reassurance dopamine hit. Anthony's
Because all of his videos are about being a gay victim and like the victimhood of being gay. James is trying to communicate to us that he was told that being gay was wrong so much that he developed this victim complex about being gay and is now obsessed with being a gay victim because the victimhood feels good to him. But he should see this as a flaw. It's not good that you feel good being a victim. Don't embrace that. And like it sounds like he's talking about it like he knows it's a bad thing, but he's also talking about it like it's just the way it is for him.
conformity to the Rose Bride is based around the fact that she feels good being subservient because this is the only thing in her life that has ever brought her any kind of positive reward. It takes the entire series for Utena to shake her out of this mindset, and she begins to see herself as her own person. And the really cool thing is that we're now at a point of analysis where we can get to the exciting stuff. Because the language of plurality, it can apply to these characters themselves. So that we're not just talking about Akio, Anthe, and Utena, but the ways that Akio is a stand-in for every man, and that Anthe represents every victim, and that Utena represents
Jesus,
a
no,
kind
it
of
doesn't
woman.
have to be
So we
that
arrive at a game
broad.
state where men seek the
It doesn't, there's no reason to purport that it is that broad. It's like he's saying, this show, whoever you are, it definitely has something to say to you.
power of revolution to facilitate their control over women, which they already have mostly, in order to return to times when things were better. Lacking the freedom to commit sexual exploitation to Akio, and therefore men like him, impedes their ability to properly manage the world and keep everything safe.
But not all
This power
men.
that was once
You're saying
exclusively
men like
theirs, they
him, but
perceive,
you
was
before that
stolen
you
from them by
implied
the women who they are already exploiting. Utena's role is to signify a new kind of woman. This woman cannot be defeated by the traditional means, and therefore the method of dealing with them is to remove their power by feminizing them, and ultimately groom them to accept their own exploitation. And that's just what you get from the end of the world stuff, which is probably one of the weirder parts of Utena, until you get to the turning into cars thing. But I digress. There's a lot more that Utena has to say about power, truth versus illusion, schooling, adolescence, in conjunction with other symbols and themes like the upside down castle and the power of revolution.
I wonder how many takes he did on that, but I digress to get that just right, like tooth show.
This is about the revolutionary girl, Utena, after all. Which is strange, because for all that the language of revolution is dangled over
God,
her
I
head, she
hate
seems
the
to
way
reject
these
it.
scripts
Power
are
structure
written.
itself is something all versions of Utena seem to discuss, and seem to come to a singular conclusion, that the objective of those in power is to facilitate their control by crafting the next generation
His
into
head
drones.
is so tiny looking at that shot.
And this is clearest in the movie. The power brokers don't need to get their hands dirty when they can just organize an increasingly complicated schedule of duels to sick the students onto each other. Another reading of Akio, outside of Dios and the Revolution, is that his surname is Otori, which is different from his sister's, Himamiya. Otori being the same name as the Academy. Again, rather than a singular individual, he could represent a broader scope of authority figures.
Final nail in the coffin of I didn't watch the anime. Pretty sure it's explained that he took the name from marrying the woman who is the daughter of the school owner. That's why he gets to hang out in the planetarium. As she puts it, you know, people are always joking that he literally married me just so he could hang out in this planetarium all the time. It's in the show.
Figures in schooling institutions. This could range from statutory malice
Oh, Ellen, don't worry. He's definitely not going anywhere with what he's saying.
to mere unprofessionalism. I mean, there is a lot more to Utena than Akio. I'm sorry if my focus is here at the expense of spending basically no time talking about Nanami.
Oh, this can't be. I was so close to becoming the idol of the school. I can't seem to think clearly anymore. Am I having delusions? Do I need my appendix removed? Bring me a blanket, someone, and sue.
Girl needs help. I'm sure that whole ordeal is symbolic for something. Anyway, the ability of a single element of the show to function in a myriad of ways with multiple applications speaks to the creator's credit. Even if, and this is often the case with authors, many of these meanings were unintended. An authorial ability to deconstruct the world.
Is his audience craving Utena content? No. James Somerton, like I said, he was cranking out at an unbelievable rate, and we all know now why and how he was able to do that. Like coverage of every single thing that is relevant to any part of the LGBT community. Like just going down the list and covering every gay thing. He really was trying to be the king of gays, like the ultimate power bottom.
World into a collection of symbols that have this kind of universality showcases a savvy and insightful creative team. However, there is something thus far omitted. This is a show called the revolutionary
Yeah, you've said that like fucking 25 times. We get it.
girl Utena. What is this revolution? And how is Utena the one to be revolutionary if she spends
damn.
most of the anime trying to prevent others from using revolution? The use of revolution in the show is only slightly different from how we would use it. It's not something like the
What do you mean by that?
retirement of the French aristocracy, a nation becoming independent from a parent state, or even say Bernie Sanders attempting to impose a tax structure in America that's similar to what
Are
existed in
those
the
two
1960s.
things
Revolution
similar?
itself in Utena seems to be an object. One would use revolution the same way you would use a toaster. And
What?
those who know that the power of revolution resides at Otori Academy seem to
What object? What do you mean you would use it the way you would use a toaster? To brown bread? You would use revolution to brown bread in Utena? What the fuck are you talking about?
to be desperate to use it. But even though they talk about revolution as if it were a power or a tool, the language of postmodernism opens up a number of possibilities for what use revolution serves to the characters, to the plot, and to the audience. When the characters talk about the power to revolutionize the
I'm
world,
having a
it
hard
means
time like breathing listening to these sentences.
we, little media analysts that we are, don't have to look at it as a Kamehameha blast. We can approach it
What the fuck do you mean by that? How do I view something like a Kamehameha blast? I'm bewildered by this script at this point, and he looks so excited to be reading it.
as a vaguely established and largely undefined quality of being able to bring about a significant change to the world, which helps establish the deeper motivations of what each character wants
I've gotten nothing out of this video so far.
to use revolution to do. Of course, tied into this theme of revolution are miracles and eternity. And since I can't read or understand Japanese,
Other than rage.
I may be losing something in the translation, because miracles are often associated with Christian imagery. Instead, I think the plot is much more in line
You
with
keep bringing up the Christian stuff, but you totally skipped over the obvious allegories to add to the Garden of Eden. Oh my god, the only part that would have been relevant.
Alan Moore's sense of miracles. A miracle is a thing that shouldn't be possible but is. In Utena, miracles seem to be things that afford a false sense of hope. The cynical believe this thing is impossible, even if it is actually true. This is the primary driving element of Juri, who is in love with her ex-bestie and considers it an impossibility that this little psycho would ever reciprocate those feelings. The hope that she might, or that she could, is the source of Juri's toxicity.
She's just calling her a little psycho, but not explaining like why is the story of the show is interesting.
Which leads to Juri's deeper motivation. She wants to eliminate miracles from the world. She wants to use revolution to purge herself of hope, which is a recurring pattern with all duelists. Their intended uses for the power of revolution are
Which part is a recurring pattern for all duels?
self-directed. Yes, Seonji desperately wants
That they are self-directed. Okay, that's a very confusing way of phrasing that.
long-term and stable affection of a subservient woman, namely Anthe. But even if these intentions aren't specifically malicious, a character like Mickey wants to use eternity to preserve and protect
Mickey
Anthe, but only for him to use as a muse. To this,
Mouse.
he needs to first take control of her, whereas Utena's motivations are to liberate Anthe. Utena stands out because not only does she have no use for revolution, she seems to reject it. And even
I don't think Miki is trying to take control of Anthe specifically. It's more like he desperately wants to believe that she is who he needs her to be and doesn't realize that she is like somebody who will do whatever she's told.
imply that she doesn't really believe in any of it. Her exclusive motivation is to protect Anthe from the predatorial intentions of the other duelists. Treating the duels as symbolic depicts these conflicts as indicative of the ways young people clash as they develop identity. Though the student council postures itself as a political body, they do amount to a collection of young people who are
Ellen, you're right. I think this is worse than the Lily Orchard video. At least Lily was like stating opinions that came from a real like Lily had clearly seen the fucking show. Lily was wrong about the show and didn't understand the show, but at least she had seen the show and was upset for real reasons. This is somebody praising a show they haven't seen for reasons that don't make sense. This is a baffling video. Somebody vetoed this before it made it to post.
are very nervous about their future and questioning what role they are going to have in the world. Having the power to revolutionize the world means that they can have a hand on
Maybe it was just the outfit.
the wheel. Deliberate driving metaphor. From the student council's introductory monologue, it may seem like something a villain would say to announce themselves.
Prepare for trouble! Make it double!
However, the more we begin to empathize with the student council, the more we begin to see this monologue as a desperate bid to take control of their anxieties.
If it cannot break out of its shell, the chick will die without ever being born. We are the chick. The world is our egg. If we don't crack the world's shell, we
You
will
can feel that from the very start. You don't have to have watched it a bunch of times to realize that this is coming from a place of insecurity, like everything they do.
die without truly being born.
Utena echoes a particular anxiety of growing up in Japan in the 1990s, when the nation was in one of the worst financial depressions in its history. To many, it did feel like the
Oh
end of the
boy.
world, and discourse around revolution was not far off. We'll get more into that in an upcoming Evangelion video, I promise. And if Japanese
That was a haunting sentence. Tell me there's not a 50-minute anime analysis I'm gonna get paid to watch. I'll fucking die.
All the while, the powers that be, insisting that fixing things was the responsibility of the nation's youth, simultaneously scolded them for talking about upsetting the establishment values that led to these hardships in the first place.
Shut
Especially
up.
towards
You
the end
are-
of the
you
second
don't
arc.
know what you're
Discourse
talking
around growing up
about.
takes a central role as a driving theme. And then suddenly we get the third season, and
Stop
everyone is
it.
in cars and their shirts are flying off. And is Akio fucking Toga? Not that Akio doesn't have these chaotic vibes,
Yes.
but what does a casual approach to sexuality have to do with cars? Right, so, as indicated in an episode where Nanami's younger boyfriend desperately wants to be a grown-up so that he can interact with women the way that he sees older boys doing, there is a single line questioning when someone becomes an adult. The gang tosses around a few things that signify the kind of adulthood that they had in their mind, and one of them is driving a car. And then the third arc becomes all about driving cars, where we see Akio basically grooming the student body into helping him indoctrinate Utena. These scenes can be read as an older man ushering high school students into adulthood, at times before they're
An older man ushering children into adulthood at times before they're ready. No, it's grooming. You're talking about grooming. This is grooming. That's the point. It's about grooming.
ready,
Stupid.
but also certainly on his terms and not theirs. Akio's depiction of adulthood is suave, mysterious, and sexy. Even though his promises seem to ring adulthood, there's an unspoken reminder that they are in his car. Even during the duels, where each respective pretender bride is driving
An
around trying to vehicularly
unspoken
manslaughter.
reminder that they are in his car. Is it the fact that they're in his car that he's driving? Is that the unspoken reminder that they're in his car? Fucking Jesus Christ.
Utena, they are in his car. They are not in their own cars. It's not until Seonji begins to question why Toga is letting himself be manipulated into being Akio's wingman that we see them in their own vehicle, with Toga driving Seonji. A scene we can read as these two young men breaking away from the patterns of manipulation and oppression that have been established by the adults in their lives. And that isn't to say that either of these young men don't have a lot to make up for, but they have a better shot at doing the right thing while cutting their own path,
This is clearly read from somebody else's analysis.
rather than being under the tutelage of someone like Akio. This is doubled down on in the movie, where the student council members, including Seonji, appear at the end to help Anthe escape. So, what is revolution? In probably the most postmodern turn of events, that's never made clear. What exactly is this power that everyone wanted to use, abuse, and exploit Anthe and or women in general to get a hold of? What
I think this guy has seen Harry Potter and Disney movies, and that's about it.
made all of this worth it? Especially because the power is found in a castle in the sky that is described as an illusion generated by a holographic machine, but described by a character who is routinely outlined as being unreliable. Akio, as aforementioned, was unable to access the power of revolution, and not because he didn't have the power of Dios, which he took from Utena after he had her stabbed in the back. He breaks the sword of Dios, and revolution remains exclusively out of reach.
There were times where he was breaking the movie and show apart at first, but it kind of feels like he's kind of taking it for granted that they're all one story, and so that he can combine them like that. Like, I don't think he actually understands that the movie is like a retelling. I don't think he gets what the movie is.
This tracks thematically, because what honestly was Akio going to give himself with revolution that he didn't already have? His entire plot to bewitch Utena was just to try and convince her to relinquish revolution to him, but dodges the question whenever anyone asks him what he wants to do. Power for power's sake. He was already doing a bang-up job at finding a horde of people to ship his sister off to as the Rose Bride, but somehow his greatest desire and deepest anxiety stemmed from losing control of his sister, especially to another man. And I can't imagine the prospect of losing his sister to a woman is nothing short of emasculating. Is this a good place to mention that corrective rape is the most common form of sexual assault imposed on lesbians, asexuals, and trans men? And it means exactly what it sounds like.
What does it sound like it means? James, you need to talk to a fucking therapist, dude. This isn't the way to slow decompress this information. You can't bring this all through the internet. This can't be the way that you can't slow trickle your fucking... This makes me really sad. It feels like we're listening to a guy trauma decompress in like little bits and pieces in between. It's like every 25 minutes he says something like really revealing about himself. Wow, what the fuck? Let's go back a little bit. I mean, again, citation needed. How would you quantify this? I don't know.
Finding a horde of people to ship his sister off to as the Rose Bride, but somehow his greatest desire and deepest anxiety stemmed from...
Who's better at revealing something about themselves, James Somerton or Hideaki Anno? Somerton, he's more direct about it. It's just rarer, you know? It's like every 45 minutes or so, you just suddenly hear like incredibly personal details. This is definitely the most I've paid attention to one of them, because now that I know I have to really like pay attention to what I'm hearing in his videos, and since this is one where I really know what he's talking about a lot more than he does, it's like particularly egregious.
And I can't imagine the prospect of losing his sister to a woman is nothing short of...
Although I guess if we're ghostwriting, maybe I would...
emasculating. Is this a good place to mention that corrective rape is the most common form of sexual assault imposed on lesbians, asexuals, and trans men? and it means exactly what it sounds like.
Lesbians, asexual, and trans men specifically. Like, what? Where are the stats for this? How, in God's fucking name, would you get stats for this? There's no clarifications about what the fuck he was talking about there. That was so bizarre.
And while he may express disappointment in Utena for not being able to bring revolution to the world,
So out of
he's met with a
nowhere.
nasty surprise that the key to his martyrdom is suddenly making decisions for herself. And worse yet, using that new power to leave him. So we, the audience, can easily interpret that as a victory in spite of Utena's apparent defeat. That yes, she somehow did manage to use the power of revolution, and she used it in an impossible, selfless way. She liberated her best friend from a toxic power dynamic she had with her family. And for those who know, getting someone to abandon a toxic family environment, even if it is emotionally and psychologically damaging, is next to impossible. Many people who try to separate a friend from a toxic family end up having to abandon their friendship to protect their own mental health. Through a not-so-allegorical reading, we can say Utena did the same. That ultimately, in spite of her bravado and nobility, she had to throw in the towel. Anime can show teenagers saving the world from interdimensional vampires all at once. Presenting a story where a teenager can engage with deeply toxic authority figures without deep-seated emotional scars is always going to be more unrealistic.
I just can't stop thinking about like who hurt James. I'm sure he's probably still got some kind of deep-seated loyalty to this person that he'll never like admit or like give up the names. But like somewhere inside this man is screaming out like, I am a victim and somebody really fucked me up. And I don't know how to get out of the way. I don't know how to like escape the brainwashing. Like that's what I get out of this is like somebody who has like learned these like fucked up coping mechanisms from whatever strange relationship they were in and like doesn't know how to talk about it other than do like the abstraction of analysis videos, but hasn't seen any of these fucking shows. So like it's like desperately trying to cobble together your impression of shows into something relatable to yourself and your experiences that occasionally just like is so blatantly wrong.
Anthony's final decision to leave the school and find Utena speaks to her acknowledgement that she has been a participant in this, and that she wants to make things right. This also echoes the final act of Adolescence of Utena, where she becomes the literal vehicle of Anthy's escape, rather than the figurative vehicle in the anime. However, this is a postmodern reading, which means this isn't Utena, Anthy, and Akio, but a new wave of unconventional women, the suffering and victimhood of all women, and the patriarchal values that oppress women. Utena prophesies women and their struggle to free themselves from victimhood, and how this uphill battle will have casualties. Because in this context, we can appropriately examine one of the more elusive concepts, eternity, which is spoken of frequently, but has even less elaboration than revolution does. Both eternity and revolution are said to exist in the Upside-Down Castle. You'd think that eternity and the power of revolution would be contradictory things, and you'd be correct. Utena's hidden driving force through the entire plot is to reconnect with the prince.
Why would I think eternity and the power of revolution would be different things? And how am I correct for what I obviously didn't think? What the fuck are you talking about?
Gave her the signet ring. It's implied that the prince, Akio, showed her something which she now seeks to attain. And Akio uses this to groom Utena into believing the eternal thing she seeks is a romance with her prince. But Akio was never the prince Utena was trying to find. It was her all along. The signet ring may have brought her closer to this prince. However, she was the prince she was looking for. Though
the scroll was blank. It's just a mirror that reflects your face.
As more information is revealed to Utena, she remembers that, no, it was not a rose-scented embrace the prince showed her. He showed her the witch, frozen in time, bearing hateful swords in her body for all of eternity. And this is both punishment and justice. This is how the world must be. The witch, Anthy, must bear this hatred. Utena sees this as injustice, and her vow to become a prince is not in honor of the prince.
Gotta make sure I say all this really dramatically. We're in the final stretch. This is where I get my Oscar.
Who rescued her. Her bravado is not due to a pep talk
This is how I seduce my hunk.
from a handsome man. Her drive to become a prince, her will, her determination, her very driving motivation that she herself does not remember is to free Anthy from the swords of men who somehow believe that all women are responsible for the suffering of the world, and that a woman's only contribution in this world is to endure suffering for the benefit of a man. Utena's princely quest is not just to rescue Anthy.
The little licking the lips and everything. Like, he really can't help himself. I don't know. I think the editor should have cut that shit. Like, those are the little things you should just cut right out.
But to rescue all the damsels in
It makes him look like he's lying or like he doesn't,
rescue all
like
women
he's
from
putting on a show
by
and
empowering
not
them
taking what he's saying seriously.
to rescue themselves.
That was awful. That was worse than the Lily Orchard video. James, I would still work with you, but again, you can never, ever, ever do journalism again. Ever. You're literally disbarred from journalism for the rest of your life. You can't do that.
What's my worst trait? 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 Nah. See me on a date just like a punk from 88. Bumping city more so hard it's rattling your license plate. Asking what's my worst trait? What's my worst trait? You said it's the way you ask these questions that I can't relate to now. Play me something I can skate to. Smoking eighth to. Pass around the room and drink a late to. Something I can bump to while I break you in. You see me grin? God damn it, boy, I'll never win. Yo, I'm down for gin and juice tonight. I'll let you bust up in my caboose tonight. Pass out late, wake up late, and drive up a mountainside for some peace and quiet. What's my worst trait? Really good at making people hate me, and they struggle learning how to place me. Guess I'm kinda racy, racing past the lanes who want the place I own.